The baby's piercing wail sliced through the quiet living room, a sound so raw it stopped Elena's heart mid-beat. She froze, her coffee mug halfway to her lips, as little Ava's cries escalated, her tiny face red with distress. Sarah, her partner, was already halfway across the room, scooping their 1-year-old daughter into her arms, but the screams only grew louder when Elena's mother, Margaret, stepped closer with a strained smile. "Shua, sweet girl, it's okay," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she rocked Ava. But the baby's cries didn't soften, they sharpened, desperate, as if she were pleading for escape. Elena's stomach twisted. This wasn't the first time Ava had reacted this way around her mother, but tonight, the intensity felt like a warning. They lived in a small tree-lined suburb of Portland, Oregon, in a house they'd painted with dream-soft yellow walls, a nursery with star decals, and a backyard where they planned to grow old together. Elena, 28, was the steady one. A high school art teacher with a quiet strength and a knack for seeing beauty in chaos. Sarah, 27, was a freelance writer, her words as vivid as her blue eyes, her heart a tapestry of hope and scars from a childhood spent hiding who she was. They'd met 3 years ago at a local poetry reading, their hands brushing over a shared book, and from that moment, their lives had woven together imperfect, but theirs. Ava, adopted 6 months ago, was the heartbeat of their world. But Margaret's visits always cast a shadow. Elena's mother, a stern woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and a rigid sense of tradition, had never fully accepted her daughter's life with Sarah. "It's just a phase," she'd said once, her words cutting deeper than Elena let on. Yet Margaret insisted on being part of Ava's life, showing up with gifts and forced smiles, her presence a fragile truce. But Ava's cries, those gut-wrenching, inconsolable sobs, started the moment Margaret arrived and lingered long after she left. "Mom, maybe give her some space," Elena said softly, setting her mug down. Margaret's lips tightened, her eyes flicking to Sarah with a flash of something disapproval, maybe, or something darker. "She's just fussy," Margaret replied, her voice clipped. "Babies cry, Elena. You're overthinking it." Sarah's arms tightened around Ava, her gaze meeting Elena's. They didn't need words to communicate the unease that had been building for weeks. Something was wrong, and it wasn't just Margaret's coldness. Elena felt it in her bones, a mother's instinct screaming louder than Ava's wails. That night, after Margaret left and Ava finally settled, Elena and Sarah sat on their couch, the glow of a single lamp casting soft shadows. Sarah's hand found Elena's, their fingers interlocking like roots. "It's not normal, Elena," Sarah whispered. "She's fine with everyone else, your dad, my sister, even strangers. But with your mom." She trailed off, her eyes searching Elena's for answers neither had. Elena squeezed Sarah's hand, her heart racing. "I know. I've seen it too. It's like she's scared." The word hung heavy, scared. Their daughter, their light, was afraid, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that Margaret was at the center of it. The next morning, Elena watched Margaret arrive for her weekly visit, her car pulling into the driveway with a precision that mirrored her controlled demeanor. Ava, playing on a blanket with her stuffed elephant, froze the moment Margaret stepped inside. The baby's lip trembled, and within seconds, her cries filled the house again, sharp and unrelenting. Elena's heart sank as she saw Margaret's expression shift not to concern, but to irritation. "Really, Elena, you need to discipline her better," Margaret said, adjusting her scarf. "She can't just scream every time I'm here." Sarah, standing in the kitchen doorway, shot Elena a look that said, "This isn't right." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't dismiss Ava's cries anymore. Babies didn't lie, and Ava was trying to tell them something. Over the next few days, Elena and Sarah became detectives in their own home. They noticed patterns. Ava's distress peaked when Margaret held her or even stood too close. Sarah started keeping a journal, noting every visit, every cry, every odd comment Margaret made. One entry stood out. "Margaret insisted on giving Ava a bottle last week, even though we said she'd already been fed. Ava spit it up immediately, and Margaret seemed angry." Elena's mind raced back to her own childhood, Margaret's strict rules, her quick temper, the way she'd always demanded control. But this was different. This was Ava, their daughter, and Elena would burn the world down to protect her. "We need to figure this out," she told Sarah one night, her voice low but fierce. "If my mom is doing something to hurt her, I'll find out. I swear it. Sarah's eyes glistened with tears, but her jaw was set. We'll do it together, she said, pulling Elena into a hug. Their love, forged through years of fighting for acceptance, felt like armor now. They weren't just partners, they were a team, bound by a shared vow to keep Ava safe. The breakthrough came a week later. Sarah had set up a small nanny cam in the living room, hidden in a bookshelf, to monitor Ava during Margaret's visits. They told themselves it was just to ease their minds, but when they reviewed the footage, Elena's blood ran cold. The video showed Margaret alone with Ava while Elena was in the kitchen and Sarah was upstairs. Margaret was whispering something to the baby, her face too close, her hands gripping Ava's arms just tightly enough to make the baby squirm. Then as Ava began to cry, Margaret's expression hardened, and she muttered, "You'll learn to behave." Elena's hand shook as she paused the video. Sarah's face was pale, her voice barely a whisper. "Elena, what is she doing to her?" The question hung like a storm cloud, heavy with dread. They replayed the footage, searching for clues, but it only raised more questions. Was Margaret's disapproval of their relationship spilling over onto Ava? Was she trying to fix their daughter, to mold her into something that fit her rigid worldview? They stayed up all night, watching every second of the recordings, their hearts breaking with each of Ava's cries. By dawn, Elena's fear had turned to fury. She remembered the stories her mother used to tell about tough love, about breaking a child's will to make them obedient. Had Margaret crossed the line? Was she hurting Ava physically or emotionally to assert control? "We need to confront her," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "But we need proof. Something undeniable." Elena nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't just accuse Margaret without evidence. It would tear their family apart. But Ava's safety came first, always. The plan was simple but agonizing. They'd invite Margaret over again, keep the camera rolling and watch her every move. Elena felt sick at the thought of using her own mother as bait, but Ava's cries were a call to action she couldn't ignore. As they prepared, Sarah took Elena's face in her hands, her touch grounding. "We're doing this for her," she said. "For us." Elena kissed her, pouring every ounce of love and resolve into it. "For us," she echoed. The weight of their love, their family, and the truth they were about to uncover pressed down on them, but together they were unstoppable. The air in the house felt thick as Elena and Sarah prepared for Margaret's next visit. They moved with quiet precision, setting the nanny cam to capture every angle of the living room while Ava played in her high chair, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Elena's heart pounded, a mix of dread and determination, as she rehearsed what she'd say if Wenthy caught something undeniable. Sarah, usually the softer of the two, had a fire in her eyes today. "If she's hurting Ava, Elena, I don't care if she's your mom. We end this." Her words were a vow, and Elena felt their weight settle into her bones. They'd built this life together against the whispers of a small town, against the disapproval of families who didn't understand, and they'd fight for it now, no matter the cost. Margaret arrived at noon, her knock sharp and punctual. She stepped inside with her usual air of authority, her gray coat pristine, her smile practiced but thin. "Where's my little girl?" she asked, her tone too bright, as she set a bag of baby clothes on the counter. Ava, strapped in her high chair, immediately tensed, her tiny hands gripping the tray. The room seemed to hold its breath as Margaret approached, and then it came, the wail, high and frantic, splitting the silence. Elena's stomach churned, but she forced herself to stay calm. "She's been a bit fussy today," she lied, watching Margaret's reaction. Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she masked it. "She'll settle," Margaret said, reaching for Ava. The baby's cries grew louder, her body twisting away as if Margaret's touch burned. Sarah stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. "Maybe let her be for now, Margaret. She's having a rough day." Margaret's lips pursed, but she backed off, folding her arms. "You two coddle her too much," she said, her tone sharp. "She needs structure, not all this softness." The word dripped with judgment, and Elena felt it like a slap. She exchanged a glance with Sarah, their silent agreement clear. "Keep going. Get the proof." The afternoon dragged on, tense and suffocating. Margaret stayed for hours, her presence like a shadow over the house. Elena and Sarah took turns distracting her, keeping her in the living room where the camera could see everything. They offered coffee, asked about her garden, anything to keep her there without arousing suspicion. But every time Margaret got close to Ava, the baby's cries erupted, each one a dagger in Elena's heart. Finally, Sarah suggested a break. "I'll take Ava upstairs for a nap," she said, scooping the baby into her arms. Ava quieted almost instantly, nuzzling into Sarah's shoulder. Margaret watched them go, her expression unreadable, and Elena seized the moment. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, guiding Margaret to the couch. The camera was still rolling, hidden in plain sight. "I've noticed Ava's been different around you," Elena started, her voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "She cries every time you're near, and it's not just fussiness. It's like she's scared." She watched her mother's face for any crack, any sign of guilt. Margaret's eyes hardened. "Don't be ridiculous, Elena. Babies cry. You're reading too much into it because of your lifestyle." The word landed like a stone, heavy with years of unspoken resentment. Elena's breath caught, but she pressed on. "This isn't about me and Sarah. This is about Ava. If something's wrong, I need to know." Margaret leaned forward, her voice low. "You want to know what's wrong? You're raising her in a house that's unnatural. She senses it. Children need stability, not this." Her words were venom, and Elena felt them seep into her, stirring old wounds. But she didn't flinch. She thought of Sarah upstairs, of Ava's trusting eyes, and her resolve hardened. "Mom, if you're doing something to Heron, I think I'll find out," Elena said, her voice low and fierce. Margaret's face paled, but she didn't respond. Instead, she stood, grabbed her coat, and left without another word. The door clicked shut, and Elena's knees buckled. She sank onto the couch, her hands trembling as she realized what she'd just done. She'd drawn a line, and there was no going back. Sarah came downstairs minutes later, Ava asleep in her arms. She sat beside Elena, their shoulders touching, and whispered, "Did you get anything?" Elena nodded, her throat tight. "Enough to know she's hiding something. Let's check the footage." They waited until Ava was settled in her crib before pulling up the video. The footage was damning, not in a single glaring moment, but in the details. Margaret's whispered words to Ava, too quiet to make out but laced with a cold edge. The way she gripped Ava's arm when she thought no one was watching, not hard enough to bruise but enough to make the baby flinch. And then the moment that made Sarah gasp. Margaret slipping something into Ava's botley, a tiny pinch of powder from her purse, quick and subtle, before offering it to the baby. "What the hell is that?" Sarah whispered, her voice shaking. Elena's mind raced, a sickening realization dawning. "We need to test that bottle," she said, her voice barely audible. They rushed to the kitchen, where the bottle sat untouched from earlier. Sarah poured a small amount into a glass, the liquid looking innocent enough, but Elena's gut screamed otherwise. They called a friend, a nurse named Jamie, who agreed to run a discreet test at her lab. Hours later, Jamie called back, her voice grim. "It's a mild sedative," she said. "Not enough to do serious harm, but definitely enough to make a baby drowsy or distressed. Elena, you need to report this." Elena's world tilted. Her own mother drugging her daughter. The betrayal was a knife, twisting deeper with every thought. Sarah's hand found hers, grounding her. "We're going to stop this," Sarah said, her voice fierce. "For Ava." That night they held each other tightly, Ava sleeping peacefully between them. The love they shared, the life they'd built, felt both fragile and unbreakable. They knew what came next would be ugly, confronting Margaret, involving the police, but they also knew they'd face it together. For Ava, for their family, they'd fight until justice was served. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen curtains, but it did nothing to warm the chill in Elena's heart. She stared at the bottle on the counter, its contents now evidence of a betrayal she could barely comprehend. Sarah sat across from her, her eyes red from a sleepless night, her hand resting protectively on Ava's high chair. The baby babbled softly, unaware of the storm her cries had unleashed. "We call 911 today," Sarah said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "We have the footage, the lab results. It's enough." Elena nodded, but her chest ached. Confronting her mother meant dismantling the fragile ties that remained of her family, but Ava's safety was non-negotiable. She thought of Margaret's cold words, her veiled disgust for their life, and the powder slipped into Ava's bottle. The pieces fit too well, and the truth was unbearable. They spent the morning preparing, gathering every scrap of evidence. The nanny cam footage, time-stamped and backed up. The lab report from Jamie. Sarah's journal of Ava's distress. Each item felt like a brick in a wall they were building to protect their daughter. By noon, Elena's hands were steady as she dialed 911. Her voice clear as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. "My mother's been giving my daughter something sedatives, we think. We have proof. We need help." The police arrived within the hour, 2 officers with calm demeanors and notepads ready. Officer Daniels, a woman with kind eyes, listened as Elena and Sarah recounted everything, from Ava's cries to the damning video. They played the footage, watching Margaret's subtle movements on the screen, and Sarah's grip on Elena's hand tightened as the officer's face grew serious. "This is enough to bring her in for questioning," Daniels said, her voice firm. "We'll need to take the bottle and the lab report as evidence. Can you arrange for her to come here?" Elena's stomach twisted, but she nodded. She picked up her phone and texted Margaret. "Can you come over this afternoon? We need to talk about Ava." The reply came quickly, of course. "Be there at 3. The wait was agonizing. Elena and Sarah took turns pacing, holding Ava, whispering reassurances to each other. When Margaret's car pulled into the driveway, Elena's heart thudded so loudly she thought it might crack her ribs. Margaret stepped inside, her face a mask of calm, but her eyes darted between Elena and Sarah, sensing the tension. "What's this about?" Margaret asked, setting her purse down. Before Elena could answer, Officer Daniels stepped forward, her badge gleaming. "Mrs. Carter, we need to ask you some questions about your interactions with your granddaughter, Ava. We have evidence suggesting you've been administering an unauthorized substance to her." Margaret's face froze, her composure cracking for the first time. "That's absurd," she snapped, but her voice wavered. "I would never hurt her." Elena's throat tightened, her mother's denial a fresh wound. Sarah stepped closer, her voice low and fierce. "We saw you, Margaret. On video. You put something in her bottle." The room went silent, the weight of the accusation hanging heavy. Margaret's eyes widened, then narrowed, her hands clenching. "You're spying on me? In my own daughter's house." Her voice rose, but there was no innocence in it, only defensiveness. Officer Daniels raised a hand. "Ma'am, you can explain at the station. We need you to come with us." As the officers led Margaret to the car, Elena felt a strange mix of relief and grief. She'd expected to feel triumph, but instead, there was only a hollow ache. Sarah wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "For Ava." Elena nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She thought of the little girl upstairs, safe now, and the love that had carried them through this nightmare. The next few days were a blur. Margaret was questioned at the station, her purse searched, revealing a small vial of the sedative Jamie had identified. She claimed it was to calm Ava down, insisting she meant no harm, but the police weren't convinced. The case was escalating, with potential charges of child endangerment looming. Elena and Sarah met with a social worker, who praised their vigilance and assured them Ava was safe. But the emotional toll was heavy. Elena grappled with the betrayal, while Sarah poured her pain into writing, filling pages with the raw truth of their fight. One night, as they lay in bed, Ava sleeping soundly in her crib, Sarah turned to Elena. "Do you think she hated us that much?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To hurt Ava just to, what? Punish us?" Elena stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment of her mother's disapproval. "I think she hated that we're happy," she said finally. "That we built something she couldn't control." Sarah reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "We're stronger than her hate," she said, her voice fierce with love. Elena turned to her, their eyes locking, and in that moment the world felt right again. They kissed slow and deep, a promise to weather whatever came next. The investigation continued, but Elena and Sarah found solace in their routine, feeding Ava, reading her stories, watching her smile without fear. They knew the road ahead would be hard: court dates, family fallout, the weight of exposing a truth no one wanted to face. But they also knew their love was a fortress, unyielding and true, built on the foundation of their daughter's safety. Weeks passed, and the case against Margaret grew heavier, each revelation a stone added to the weight on Elena's heart. The police confirmed the sedative was a low-dose medication Margaret had access to through an old prescription, intended for her own anxiety but misused on Ava. The motive, pieced together through interviews, was as chilling as it was heartbreaking. Margaret believed Ava's distress was a sign of instability in Elena and Sarah's home, and she'd taken it upon herself to fix it, to quiet the baby and prove her point. Elena struggled to reconcile the mother she'd known strict but loving in her own way, with the woman who'd endangered her daughter. Late at night, she'd sit by Ava's crib, watching her sleep, and whisper apologies for a family she couldn't protect her from. Sarah was her anchor, her quiet strength pulling Elena back from the edge of guilt. "You're not her," Sarah would say, her hands cupping Elena's face. "You're Ava's mom, and you're everything she needs." The community response was mixed. Some neighbors rallied around them, bringing casseroles and offering support, moved by their courage to protect Ava. Others whispered, their judgment cloaked in concern. Was it really necessary to involve the police? "She's your mother." The words stung, but Elena and Sarah held their heads high, their love for each other and Ava a shield against the gossip. They attended a local LGBTQ support group, finding solace in stories of others who'd fought for their families against prejudice. One woman, a single mom with a trans son, hugged them tightly and said, "You're showing Ava what love looks like. Don't ever stop." The legal process was grueling. Margaret hired a lawyer, claiming she acted out of concern, not malice. The court ordered a psychological evaluation, and the results painted a picture of a woman trapped in her own rigid beliefs, unable to accept her daughter's life. Elena sat through hearings, her heart breaking as she heard her mother's defense. "I just wanted Ava to be normal." The word normal echoed in Elena's mind, a reminder of every time she'd felt less than in her mother's eyes. Sarah, meanwhile, channeled her pain into advocacy. She started writing articles about their experience, anonymized to protect Ava, but raw and unflinching. Her words spread online, sparking conversations about family dynamics, hidden abuse, and the strength of queer families. Messages poured in from strangers' parents, survivors, allies who saw their own struggles in her story. "You're giving us hope," one wrote, and Sarah cried as she read it, her heart swelling with purpose. One evening, as they prepared for another court date, Elena found Sarah in the nursery, singing softly to Ava. The baby giggled, her tiny hands reaching for Sarah's face, and Elena's chest ached with love. She joined them, wrapping her arms around both, and for a moment, the world was just the three of them, unbreakable. "We're going to be okay," Elena whispered, and Sarah nodded, her eyes shining. "More than okay. We're us." The trial date loomed, and with it the possibility of Margaret facing jail time. Elena grappled with what justice meant: punishment for her mother, or healing for her family. She and Sarah met with a therapist, who helped them navigate the guilt and anger, reminding them that protecting Ava was their greatest act of love. They decided to push for a restraining order alongside any charges, ensuring Margaret could never come near Ava again. The night before the trial, they took Ava to the park where they'd first kissed, the same oak tree standing tall against the sunset. They spread a blanket, let Ava toddle in the grass, and held each other close. "No matter what happens tomorrow," Sarah said, her voice steady, "we've already won. We have her. We have us." Elena kissed her, the taste of salt and hope on her lips, and felt the truth of it in her soul. As they walked home, Ava nestled in Sarah's arms. Elena thought of the future, not the pain of the trial, but the life they'd build. They'd teach Ava to be brave, to love fiercely, to stand up for what's right. The weight of the past was heavy, but their love was heavier, a force that could carry them through anything. The courtroom was cold, its fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on the wooden benches. Elena sat beside Sarah, their hands clasped tightly, as the judge reviewed the evidence. Ava was with Sarah's sister, safe and unaware, but her presence was felt in every word spoken, every piece of evidence presented. The nanny cam footage played on a screen, Margaret's actions undeniable, and Elena's heart clenched as she saw her mother's face, defiant, then crumbling across the room. The prosecution laid out the case: child endangerment, unauthorized administration of a controlled substance, emotional abuse rooted in prejudice. Margaret's lawyer argued diminished capacity, painting her as a misguided grandmother desperate to help. But the judge's face was unyielding, and when Margaret took the stand, her voice shook. I thought I was doing what was best, she said, avoiding Elena's gaze. I didn't mean to hurt her. Elena wanted to believe her, but the truth was in Ava's cries, in the vial of sedatives, in the years of judgment that had built to this moment. Sarah's hand squeezed hers, a reminder that they were in this together. The judge's ruling came swiftly. A year of probation, mandatory counseling, and a permanent restraining order. Margaret would have no contact with Ava, or with Elena and Sarah, unless they chose it. It was justice, but it felt like loss to a mother severed from their lives. A wound that would take years to heal. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp, the sky a soft gray. Elena and Sarah stood together, their breath visible in the autumn chill. It's over, Sarah said, her voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. Elena nodded, but her eyes were distant. Not really, she said. We'll carry this. But we'll carry it together. They drove home in silence, the weight of the day settling into their bones. When they walked through the door, Ava's laughter greeted them, bright and unburdened. Sarah's sister handed her over, and the baby nestled into Elena's arms, her warmth a balm. They thanked Sarah's sister, then sat on the couch, Ava between them, and let the quiet hold them. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt. Sarah's articles gained traction, leading to a book deal about their journey, a story of love, betrayal, and resilience. Elena returned to teaching, her classroom a haven where she poured her heart into her students, many of whom faced their own struggles with identity and acceptance. They started a scholarship fund for queer youth, a small way to give back, to show Ava the world they wanted for her. One spring evening, they hosted a small gathering in their backyard. Friends, chosen family, people who'd stood by them. The air was filled with laughter, the scent of blooming lilacs, and the soft strum of a guitar. Ava toddled between guests, her smile infectious, and Elena watched her, marveling at her strength. Sarah caught her eye, raising a glass in a quiet toast. To us, she mouthed, and Elena smiled, her heart full. Later, as the stars came out, they sat under the oak tree in their yard, Ava asleep in a blanket between them. Elena traced the lines of Sarah's face, memorizing the woman who'd fought beside her, who'd loved her through the darkest days. I'd do it all again, Elena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For you. For her. Sarah leaned in, their foreheads touching. So would I, she said. We're a family. Nothing can break that. Their kiss was a promise sealed under the vast night sky, a testament to a love that had faced hate and won. The road ahead wasn't easy, there were still whispers, still scars, but they walked it together. Ava grew, her laughter a reminder of what they'd fought for. And in their home, filled with art and stories and love, they built a future where no cry went unheard, no truth went unspoken, and no heart went unloved. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.